How's it going, everyone? It's Vivi and welcome back. So, Jack, Ratchet, and Sly, they're like these iconic mascots, like this Sony trio, right? Kinda like how we have Crash Bandicoot and Spyro. Like they say, you can't have Crash without Spyro, you can't have Orange without Purple. Now, true, we don't currently have a Spyro game, well, apart from the whole Skylanders Academy and all that, but what I'm trying to get at is, there was something about these three series back in the day. There was this big connection between the three, well, the developers. And not to mention that Naughty Dog had shared some of Insomniac Games' technical assets, the engine for the precursor Legacy. For going commando, Insomniac Games used the same engine, but they optimized it and built upon it. Also, don't forget the many Easter eggs in Ratchet & Clank 2 especially, the Jak and Daxter posters and the Sly Cooper 1, the Thievius Raccoonist demo, and the main menu. So in other words, we can now see that these three characters, well, series, were iconic Sony platformers, let's put it that way. Maybe this is just coincidental, but the stories of these characters, there's one huge similarity. For those of you who've played all three series, well, at least a few games, what is the most obvious, common thing they have? Gameplay? Not really. You can argue that Ratchet & Clank Going Commando and Jak 2 are similar, but some believed that Jak 2 was more story-driven, whereas Ratchet & Clank was just action, mission-packed. And when it comes to comparing the Ratchet & Clank series, the classic, with the Future Saga on the PS3, that's how I would describe it. The classic one was more about gameplay and going after multiple missions. The Future Saga introduced a bigger story element. So if it's not the gameplay, what is this common thing I'm referring to? Very simple, the parents. Now, many video game characters, their parents are not really mentioned, and people find that it's unnecessary to dive into that lore, but there's just something too similar about their parents. Their fathers especially. Ratchet's father, he sent his kid to the Solana galaxy, most likely set to autopilot to Planet Veldin. Kaden is presumed dead. He could still be alive, but the idea here is that Ratchet never really knew his father. He was way too young. He doesn't even remember him. The only picture he saw of him was that locket Alistair had. And how did Kaden die? He was killed by the leader of the Kragmites, Tachyon, Jack's father, Damas. He was banished to Spargus City by Baron Praxis. He apparently hadn't seen his son ever since. Now Jak, he did see his father as he got older, but for a very brief moment, he discovered that his father was right in front of him. He died. And Jak, he never really grew up with his father, maybe just for a few years, until he got banished to a different city. And as you all know, Jak grew up in Sandover Village. He went back in time, grew up in Sandover, and went back to Haven City to repeat the time loop. Sly Cooper, his father was about to give the book to his son, while Sly was about to inherit it. He was 8 years old. So already we know that Sly was raised by his father for 8 years. During that night, a group of 5 people who were known as the Fiendish Five, they barged in and killed both of his parents. And how sure are we that both parents are dead? Sly Cooper said that they caught up with my parents. So there you go. Now maybe Sly is the one who lived with his father the longest, 8 years. I don't know how old Jak was in Jak 2, I don't know if it was ever mentioned somewhere, maybe in the guides, I'm not too sure, but I'd say Sly probably was the luckiest, let's say. But still, his father died and never got the chance to grow with him during his teenage years. As for the mothers, we have absolutely no clue. While they're all dead. As for clues, the only clue we had about Ratchet's mother was that Tachyon caught up with her. That's all. Apart from that, none of them were ever mentioned in any sort of way. And it's not like they died of sickness. They were all murdered. While Damas, he was crushed and died soon after he told that his son had that amulet. And then Jak realized he was talking about him. So just for a very brief second, he was talking to his father. Yes, he was talking to Damas a lot in the game, but to have that feeling that you're talking to your actual father, it was quite a short moment. And seeing as how he never mentioned his father in the previous games, we can say he didn't have much memories about his father when he was younger. We just don't know how old Jak was when he lost his father, well, when he got banished to Spargus City. Anything else? Well, Jack and Daxter, they're a duo. Ratchet and Clank, that's another duo. But comparing Daxter to Clank, it's like comparing a potato to a smartphone. And Sly Cooper, we're looking at 3 characters. The guy who's athletic, the brains, and the muscle. Anything common about their personalities? Well, of course, apart from the most obvious thing, being heroes, well, Ratchet, he's all about saving the galaxy. Jack, he saved his city by defeating the metalhead leader Core. As for Sly Cooper, he puts other thieves behind bars while he gets them captured, and Carmelita handles the rest. The villains in Ratchet and Clank and Jak and Daxter, they caused havoc all around. We have a galaxy and a city. As for Sly Cooper, I feel like the villains always targeted Sly mainly, Clockwork being one and Dr. M being another. Dr. M hated Sly's father. He was apparently selfish, not a good friend. Clockwork just hated the Coopers for some unknown reason. As for Arpeggio, well, we later realized that the true villain was Neela the whole time. Well, actually, there was that whole situation about hypnotizing people in Paris to cause hate, to power up Clockwork. So Arpeggio did kinda target the city. Who knows what happened to some of the civilians, turning mad all of a sudden. Anyways, back to Neela. She backstabbed Arpeggio, she took over Clockwork's frame, and she wanted to destroy Sly. Probably all because of the hate that went inside her due to that chip. Now, if Arpeggio were inside the frame instead of Neela, was he going to cause terror? I mean, Arpeggio just wanted immortality, so we're not too sure what he wanted to do with that. Did Clockwork himself harm anyone who was in his way? I mean, Dr. M, he did. He poisoned one of his guards. As for Sly 4, it's not the main villain, but we did have a side villain by the name Toothpick who shot one of his workers during a cutscene. But if you've played Sly Cooper, all of the villains most of the time targeted Sly. Well, for the main villains, the final bosses. So now, every time I say I want Sly Cooper to head in a different direction, something that's more story driven, what I mean is, the villains always target Sly, right? But there's always this question, why? Why did they hate his family? Like, simply dive deeper into that. Some might say, but it was explained. Clockwork, he wanted immortality and he hated the Coopers. Okay, but what caused his hate? 2. Was Connor such a good friend? Was he a bad friend? That's another question. As for Neela, she entered Clockwork's frame. She wanted to be immortal, but I found that quite sudden. Maybe there was some sort of trauma back in the day? Something that happened to her when she was younger? I mean, yeah, you're immortal, right? But why do you want to be immortal? Like someone pointed out a short while ago, aren't you gonna get bored of immortality? But what about Clockwork? Well, Clockwork had his reasons, I guess. He hated the Coopers. What caused that hate? We have absolutely no idea. I mean, Ratchet and Clank, Nefarious had backstory. Apparently he went to school with Quark. Tachyon, he was found as an egg and raised by the Lombaxes, and then realized what actually happened to his race. He wanted revenge. Jak and Daxter, well, I have to admit, Gol and Maya needed more cutscenes, and if they do make a reimagining, I want to see these two have their own cutscenes, discuss, see how they think, maybe even give a flashback to their past, to see when exactly Dark Eco turned them mad. And again, Sly Cooper, when you have multiple villains targeting the main protagonist, there's a very big reason why, and I want them to explore that. Well, you can argue and say, Paradox, he did have a backstory. His father was put behind bars, and he wanted revenge, but that wasn't his ultimate goal. His ultimate goal was to be known as the greatest thief, have a huge status in the future. And how did he try and accomplish that? By targeting Sly's family, of course. Anyways, I think I've rambled a lot at this point, so I'm gonna leave it at that. So, as usual, do your stuff. If you have any questions, if you disagree or agree on some parts of the video, mention everything in the comment section below. And as always, I've been Vivi, and thank you for watching.